Well, it must be Wednesday. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here at the Temple Hayes On Fire for Life show. We are on fire for life. We have guest artists, healers, teachers, authors, experts that teach us how to have a better life, how to aim greater than perhaps we did the year before, but people that teach us different things and help us expand our consciousness and our awareness. I've been so excited about having Joseph Selby today because he lives in a question and is an author about things we're always curious about. Is it possible that all diseases can be healed? Is it possible? Is there a door, a way? Is it belief? Is it faith? Is it science? Exactly what is it? So, instead of finishing the sentence for him, I'm going to bring him in right now. Thank you so much for being with us. I've been really looking forward to, I always love any subject, that helps us be on fire for life. In other words, to bring life to any experience that, as you may know with my work, that the secret of life is not whether we live or die, it's that we don't allow ourselves to die while we're living. And so there are so many people in our societal beliefs that they get a diagnosis or they believe the louder voice, the voice that's louder than currently their own, and they accept what they're being told. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And your new book is going to be out soon. But everybody, just give a round of applause to Joseph Selby, and thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
So, how did you get involved in this field and working with health and working with possibilities? Tell our listeners about you.
Well, I got my feet firmly on the path of what's generally known as self realization or um, the seeking spirit, looking for God. So many different ways that people describe it, depending on where their backgrounds are. But I was very fortunate to get on that path at a very young age. By the time I was 20, I was living in a spiritual community in Northern California called Ananda, which is inspired by and based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. And many people recognize the name Paramahansa Yogananda from his book, Autobiography of a Yogi.
Mhm.
And so many people have been touched by that book because it's a great way of uniting all spiritual faiths, the universal view of spirituality that I think people in this time really crave. And it hit the spot for me.
Mhm.
And one of the things that Yogananda also does, in addition to that uniting universal spiritual perspective, is that even though he was an Indian man and he came to America when he was an adult, he taught to a Western audience very consciously using science and using the vernacular of science. And when he could, rather than kind of defaulting to quoting a Sanskrit scripture, he would instead explain a subtle spiritual truth in terms of neuroscience or quantum physics or medicine. And he was very conversant in Western science. And as a Westerner and as a science oriented person, I found that extremely satisfying. So that's kind of the two sides of why it is I'm on your show.
Mhm.
Uh, Coming to a very meaningful spiritual path for myself and seeing the connections between science and spirituality.
I love that. And for the benefit of our listeners, and I actually interviewed them, the film Finding Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about the Ananda living and just the energy and the beliefs and the true happiness that people find and feel there. And Yogananda has had such an influence, is active today probably as ever or more so. There's one quote, and I wanted to look this up before we talked, but it's something about, I have so much electricity coming from my body. This is him saying this, not me. But I'm living in that kind of myself. But I have so much electricity coming from my body that when a disease or something wants to come into me, it's electrocuted.
Right.
Am I close? I mean, am I
Yeah,
anywhere?
he was, well, I think he used the term life force
Yes.
instead of electricity specifically, but the idea is exactly what you just expressed, that if our life force is strong, then it's very much more difficult for any kind of disease to take root, so to speak.
Okay. Well, it's a very powerful statement, and it really makes you envelop the possibility of, if you will, being shielded and protected. It's just, it makes you really think instead of going, well, I hope I don't catch it, or I hope I don't get it, or whatever.
But it's
But
also curative. When
mhm,
you have that strong, almost force field of life force, and it's not, life force isn't something exotic that only a few people have.
no,
Everybody has life force.
we all have it.
So when you're feeling up and positive and energized, your life force is strong and it's curative. If you are dealing with any kind of uh, issues, health issues, emotional issues for that matter, having that strong flow of life force in your being will have positive curative effects on anything that is an issue for you.
Well, when we talk about healing, and everyone, we're awaiting the book to come out on the 15th of August, entitled The Physics of Miraculous Healing: How Emotion, Mind, and Spirit Enable Unlimited Self-Healing. So you want to go to josephselbie.com, and our executive producer will put that in the chat room and on the notes so you can access that. But that is so exciting. And I love that it's so bold. It's like the physics, and this is how it is. So, how did you come to this realization?
Well, lots of different ways, but a central way was just my love of science and my love of spirituality and a deep interest in healing, sort of all dovetailed together in this book. I've also written a book called The Physics of God, in which I lay out a physical support, scientific support for the existence of God and how they come together. So it was natural for me to look at this from the perspective of health and healing. And what I like to do in any of my books really is find the anomalies that can't be explained by science.
Mm.
And the reason why it's useful is that they're real, they happen. Miraculous healing does happen. It has been verified by doctors, by very reputable doctors. In Lourdes, for example, they have a group of doctors that examines every claim of miraculous healing caused by taking the waters at Lourdes or being at Lourdes. And they meticulously examine them against multiple criteria. And one of the criteria is that the healing has to have taken place instantaneously, and it has to have remained healed. And then there are other things that back it up, like there has to have been a reputable diagnosis, there has to have been, radiological or other evidence of the disease prior to the healing. But you look into that and other stories, and if you're just willing to take a good look at it, you have to accept that people have been healed of not only terminal illnesses, but they've been healed instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, according to medicine, modern medicine, which is based on biochemistry and molecular biology, that kind of instantaneous, extraordinarily rapid healing is impossible.
Yeah.
It just can't happen because the way in which medicine sees the body is a molecular machine, and there are speed limits, if you will, to how the molecular machine can work. And a complete physical transformation just explodes that speed limit. Mm-hmm. So what I use that as a starting point to then explore, well, what in science could explain it? And it's ironic to some degree that medicine is based on science, good science, solid science, but science that stopped evolving 100 years ago.
Wow.
And what took off from there 100 years ago are the disciplines of relativity with Einstein and quantum physics with Niels Bohr, and in the more modern era, disciplines like string theory and M theory. And if you look at them, the physics that's more on the frontier of scientific discovery, there's actually fascinating support for how it could be possible for a physical body to change rapidly. So that was my approach, is it does exist, miraculous healing does exist, and if so, how is it possible?
Mm-hmm. So as someone that is very important in your life, gives you a call and says, oh my goodness, you're going to be shocked. I've been watching the 3 ingredients that I eat on every meal. I've been mindful, exercising, caring for my body. And I was just diagnosed that I have stage 4. Because I know there are a lot of people like that.
Right.
So I know I'm not asking for diagnosis, but so where do we go from there? Past what an individual goes through of being in shock and being inundated with ideas and suggestions, from hanging off a mountain upside down to, only drinking water for a week to, you know what I mean. I'm not being facetious, nor am I taking away from the deep, deep commitment of a person saying, I want to live. So where do we go from there?
Well, it's an excellent question, and I think it's the question for many people who are in that condition, in that situation. And I don't want to express this as if there is one simple answer to that question.
Right.
But I think the majority of the answers have to do with your own emotional state, with your own belief about illness, and with your connection or lack of connection to spirit, to your own higher nature.
Okay.
And there have been many books written about people who have, beaten cancer, as the phrase is used, but have overcome, had radical remission, or completely healed from cancer. And in all those books, you see a certain theme, which is that the people who are successful at healing themselves decided to take charge of their life. That was first and foremost. They realized that medicine alone, with the person being just a passive recipient, as various doctors and various levels of cancer will be diagnosed, will say, there's a 50% chance, there's a 10% chance, there's a 90% chance, whatever it is. But you're pretty clear when you get diagnosed to talk to doctors about the success rates of chemotherapy and radiation therapy, et cetera. It's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're taking charge of your life and you don't want to be passive and you don't want to just rely on medicine, then you begin to dig deeper. And there's a great deal to be said for changing diet, for exercise, for sort of stopping behaviors that are difficult on your health, smoking, drinking, etc. But they're not enough by themselves. You also need to see if you can find your way to understanding, and this is hard for people, but find your way to understanding how you may have created your own cancer, your own terminal illness. And this is part of taking charge of your life, is taking responsible for your life, taking responsibility for how you have lived your life, the emotional moods and modes you've lived in, and just what you believe. If you believe strongly that you are a biological machine and that there is no cure for certain cancers, in all likelihood, it's going to win. That the diagnosed unfolding of that disease is what you're going to experience. The people who overcome cancer are the ones who have arrived at, either before or as the process of taking charge of their life, have arrived at understanding that it is beatable.
Mm-hmm.
And they can believe it at a deep level. Belief is so enormously powerful. Emotion too. Belief especially so. I share in my book some amazing stories about what people believed and what happened as a result. And perhaps the most astonishing story is about a man named Mr. Wright. And Mr. Wright in the 60s was diagnosed with
R-I-G-H-T or W-R-I-G-H-T?
W. Yeah. So Mr. Wright with a W was near death, and he had lymphoma. His lungs were filling with fluid. He had visible tumors on his body. He had difficulty breathing. He couldn't get out of bed on his own. And his doctor estimated he had a week or two to live. But Mr. Wright found an article and discovered that in the hospital in which he was a patient, was going to do a test of a chemotherapy drug for lymphoma, called Prebiosm. And he got very excited that not only was there a drug, but he was going to be tested right in the hospital where he was. So he talked to his doctor, Dr. West, and asked him to be part of the trial. And at first, Dr. West said, no, you're, as politely as possible, basically said, you're too far gone. The people we're looking for need to be in much earlier stages of lymphoma for this test. But Mr. Wright persisted, and Dr. West finally gave in. And on a Friday afternoon, he injected Mr. Wright, along with the other test subjects in the hospital. And when he came back on Monday, Mr. Wright was the only patient who'd shown any change. And in fact, so much change, he was standing up, the tumors had disappeared, he could breathe, the fluid in his lungs had gone away, all in 2 days.
Wow.
And he continued to get better to the point where he checked out of the hospital. And because he was a pilot, he actually flew himself home. But a few months later, Mr. Wright, who stayed interested in his disease, and particularly in this drug carbazin, read a report saying that carbazin had proved to be useless. And in fact, all the other people in the hospital had gone through the trial, had not had any positive results.
Wow.
And 2 days after reading that, he was back in the hospital. His tumors had returned. He had fluid on his lungs and was again destined to die within a week or two. Dr. West was fascinated by this and decided to try something that today would probably be considered unethical. But he told Mr. Wright that, yes, it's true, carbazin had failed in the tests, but there is now an extra strength carbazin that I'm going to be getting a shipment of in the next few days, and I will give it to you. And Mr. Wright got highly energized by that and was anticipating this new injection. And Dr. West gave him an injection, but it was of water. There was no such thing as a enhanced carbazin, but it had the same impact. Mr. Wright, in 2 days, all the tumors went away, his fluid drained out of his lungs, and he was up and about, energized, and then again went home. Well, unfortunately for Mr. Wright, some months later, again, he read another medical journal which said carbazin has been proven completely useless and it's no longer even being considered. This time he was back in the hospital, same thing, fluid on the lungs, visible tumors, but this time he died in 2 days. So no one else was affected, either positively or negatively by carbazin, but Mr. Wright, because he believed so passionately in the possibility of it, actually got better. And the only difference between Mr. Wright and everybody else who was given the drug is the power of his belief. So imagine if Mr. Wright's belief was not in carbazin, but is just simply in his own curative powers to overcome lymphoma, then we may have seen the same thing. And so that's part of the journey of, well, anyone really who has an illness, who wants to get better, is reaching that point where you believe you are going to get better and you can get better with diseases that come with this heavy, almost death sentence that are considered terminal. It's much more difficult for people to overcome that power of scientific conditioning that comes with that. But it is possible. You kind of, when you read the stories of people who have overcome cancer, almost all of them just don't do anything with the hospital anymore. They don't do anything with doctors, not because they don't appreciate what the doctors have meant and tried to do, but because they reinforce only the thought that it's incurable. And they need to get away and they need to get with people who have strong beliefs in the possibility. Now, you can get with people literally, or you can get with people by reading their books. There's much you can find online. And you can also experientially improve your beliefs by embracing prayer and meditation, where you actually feel and experience directly the power of spirit within you. And that starts to all add up together. There's one other avenue of exploration that many people have to go through. And this is true of all illness. And this is also true of staying healthy, but it's particularly true of people who have what is considered to be terminal illnesses, is you really need to take a look at your own emotional nature. Because long held, these are not an angry outburst every once in a while, or feeling sad because a friend hurt your feelings, or those kind of things that happen and then go away. There are emotional states that we hang on to for years, and we hang on to them for so long that we kind of lose touch with the fact that we have them. So it could be just deep sadness. Something happened in your life that seemed unchangeable, unfixable. And that it became in your mind just a matter of living, but not expecting to live with the kind of happiness you had before that loss. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a loss of a friend, or maybe you're running a deep well of anger that you feel like you've been badly treated by bosses or spouses or friends, and that you just carry that anger with you. One of the ways to recognize these kind of deeply running emotions is to notice what you think about when you don't have any distractions. And one of the places that is just kind of my testing zone is, what do I start thinking about when I'm in the shower? Because I can't listen to anything, I can't watch anything. I'm just in the shower. And if I find that my thoughts immediately and strongly turn to something that I'm unhappy about, that's a strong signal to me that I really need to work on changing that emotion. But if you've had these kind of emotions, despair, sadness, anger, for 5 years, 10 years, decades, it can have insidiously destroyed your health at a cellular level. And it's really cellular level breakdown that is what causes the significant illnesses that modern medicine doesn't have any way to heal. So things like cancer, of course, Crohn's disease, diabetes, hypertension, other kinds of heart disease, they're all the result of, taking, for example, diabetes, the loss of cellular functions. So the cells in your pancreas that used to create insulin stop being able to create insulin. So modern medicine doesn't cure diabetes. Modern medicine gives you artificial insulin so that you can inject yourself and continue to function. But if you can get your emotions back to positive and away from these long-held negative emotions, and if you can get your belief in the right view of your particular situation, and especially if you can feel that foundational support of connecting to spirit, your actual cells can fix themselves. It's the power to have your pancreas cells, again, let's use that example, to start creating insulin. While medicine can't do it, your inner spiritual powers can. So there's those three prongs, and I recommend anyone, for any reason, whether you want to improve your health, whether you have ongoing issues that get in your way, or whether you have a serious life-threatening or just life, destroying
Mm-hmm.
condition, look in those first. All the others, diet, exercise, and the many, many other good and valuable ways to become healthier are all good. But then the lion's share of your health or ill health comes from your emotions, your beliefs, and that connection to spirit. So work on those first, even if you embrace all the others.
So emotions, what are the three? Emotions.
What you really deeply believe, and making a real and meaningful connection to spirit. So you feel yourself buoyed up. You feel yourself made more peaceful. You feel yourself more joyful by connecting to spirit in meditation, especially prayer, also. But that, because it's experiential, has a way of also transforming your beliefs to the positive. And it has a way of also allowing you to experience positive emotions. Now, there's another side to this, which I think is important, because a lot of people know about the connection between emotions and ill health or disease. And there are many, many systems out there to help you identify and release emotions. And I think, I don't want to say anything on the negative side about it, but I think far more effective is to awaken positive emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like increasing the flow in a river pulls all the detritus in the river along with it, right? All the little eddies of twigs and branches and leaves that gathered at the edges of the river are just swept up in that greater flow of the river. So it's also true with positive emotion. If you can get strong positive emotions going and feel the energy of that, it tends to, one, keep you in a positive emotion to begin with, but two, it tends to transform, transmute, kind of remove the energy from the negative emotions that you had been experiencing previously. And same with belief. I don't recommend doing an exhaustive self-analysis on what you believe that's negative, but instead find the beliefs that are more positive and figure out ways to embrace them. It can be affirmation. It can be, as I said, reading books that inspire you about people who have those beliefs. It can be reading books like mine that show you the power of belief and why it is so important to have it. And most deeply of all is just making that connection to spirit. Makes it much easier to believe in your unlimited ability to heal when you feel that your nature, your true nature, your spiritual nature is itself unlimited.
Mm-hmm. It is so powerful what you're saying. And as I've interviewed people through the years and talked about, cancer and various forms of life-threatening illnesses, I also bring to light, there's another one that's called alcoholism. So, as I'm coming up on 37 years of sobriety, the thing of it is with talking about beliefs is I never believed that it would be hard not drinking.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I didn't buy into that. It doesn't mean people weren't telling me that.
Right.
Oh, it's awful and you're miserable and it's a real struggle, and I thought, well, I'm just coming out of that. That was what it was like when I was an active user. That was struggle, apology, low self-esteem, all of that.
Yes.
And it's like, well, I'm not willing to do that. So that's how I'm identifying with what you're talking about too. With my belief was that this is going to be better. I'm going to be better. Life's going to be filled with so many great memories, which I will actually remember. And I don't believe in struggle about it. And it never has been,
That's great.
all these years. But
That's
that
great.
power of belief versus so many other people were told, oh, you just feel miserable half the time. You have to have somebody on your phone to call to help talk you out of it. Or I was like, I don't want to buy into all that. So, you know, it
Well,
is.
the other piece of belief that I address perhaps more than any other in the book is the beliefs that have been established in most of us as a result of our faith in modern medicine and our faith in science in general.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people who just don't believe that healing is possible for certain illnesses, ones that they may in fact have themselves, because they believe, with depth in the model that medicine has been giving us. But this other model that comes out of physics is a really freeing and convincing model. I had one of the reviewers of the book wrote me an endorsement, and one of the things she said was, I thought, as the author, was just spot on. She was saying what she experienced was exactly what I would hope everyone who reads the book experiences. And the way she described it is, she said, Louise Hay taught us that we can heal ourselves. Joseph Selby teaches us how that's possible. And I don't want to take personal credit for it, but it's the fact that there is a scientific view that allows for extraordinarily rapid physical change. And we find it in the fields of string theory and M theory, which is, as I say, the first half of the book or more is helping people to understand why these disciplines that they may only have remotely heard about, like quantum physics and string theory, are so radically different than what most of us think reality is like.
So I loved your story about Mr. Right, and I'm sure that you have many encounters. Is there another story that comes to mind? Is there, someone out there that thought, the doctors told me I only have a year? Is there?
Well, there are some similar stories, not necessarily in that particular vein, but there are a number of really intriguing stories that come out of the world of people who have multiple personality disorder, which is, it's dissociative identity disorder now, but most people still know it, if they know it at all, from its previous name of multiple personality disorder. And most people are fairly familiar, because of books on it and articles about it, that people who are suffering from this have very distinct personalities that come and go. And when one is present, it has very strong abilities or tendencies or personality traits that none of the other personalities have. And some of them are quite fascinating. Like, some personalities can speak a foreign language that none of the other personalities can speak. Plus, nowhere in the history of that person did they ever learn that language.
I'm always fascinated by multiple personalities.
There's so many parallels that you can draw from in that to our own condition. But in addition to these kind of fascinating psychological aspects of it, there's also physiological aspects that are not as well known. And that is People who are, having one personality move into their body, so to speak, move into taking over, and the other personality moving out, will often cause that body to have changes, such as moles come and go. One personality was a drug user, or thought he was a drug user. Mm. And while that personality was in charge of the body, there would be needle tracks on the arm. And when that personality leaves, the needle tracks go away.
That's amazing.
Some personalities have different visual acuity. Some have 20/20 vision, others not. Some have different ocular tension in the eyeball, others not. Some have different colored irises in the same person, but just they come and go when they move in or out of that personality. But hands down, the most amazing one to me that I know of is about a woman in Germany who, when she came to the psychiatrist, and this is a common reason why people who have multiple personality disorder come to psychiatrists, is that she thought she had amnesia. Mm. And the amnesia was because all these other personalities were living huge parts of her life that she didn't remember or know anything about when she was in the personality that was, seeking help. So the psychiatrist began to work with her. And the astonishing thing is that this woman was blind. But by the time he got through, and he may still be working with her, I believe she's still alive, but at some point, the story was that of her 10 personalities, 9 of them began to be able to see to varying degrees. So not necessarily fully, although one of them could see fully, but the others would, see to varying degrees, all the way back to one personality still being completely blind. Now, when that personality that is completely blind was given, what are they called? Evoked response tests, where essentially they would have them, wired up so they could see what parts of their brain were lighting up. And then they'd shine a bright light in her eyes. Nothing would light up in her brain, which meant that literally in that personality was no physiological connection between her eyes and her brain. Mm-hmm. But when they did the evoked potential test in others, they got the brain response that they expected. So it's amazing enough as a story, but think about the fact that every time the personality who's blind comes in, she goes blind. And every time one of the other personalities come in, they begin to see. And this just, seesaws back and forth in the same person. And the only difference is the belief of each one of those personalities in how well they can see. So belief is far more powerful than we think.
Yes.
And far more able to affect us physiologically than we think.
What would be interesting through all the developments that is part of your work and others would be the ability to invoke and keep all the other personalities that can see active and have the other one not come in anymore, right? To be able to eliminate that altogether?
Yes, I'm not an expert in the treatment of people with the multiple personalities, so I don't know what is possible. I have read where the number of different personalities become fewer.
Yeah.
And I think I've also read that occasionally they all come back to just one person who,
Wow.
even though they, have these multiple tendencies, they don't lose awareness of them in the way that they did before. But I don't know how that's done.
I don't either, and yet it's so intriguing. A true story of someone that I knew that had a roommate that had the arthritis that was turned, like this, and and the legs were turned in, and that was the process of this woman. And when they went one time to check her, to do a checkup at the hospital, she became another personality, and she started dancing with everyone in the hall, same person. And there was this guy that was there that had a tumor. But then when he went to the other personality, like you're saying with the needle marks, nothing. It's just fascinating. There's so much more to being a human being with infinite potential that we have just barely tapped into.
Yeah. Well, the question that often comes up when I share this multiple personality effect, physiological effect, is more or less on the variations on the theme of, well, why can't I do that? I mean, why can't I see that kind of change? And the answer is we only have one personality, and our one personality believes what it believes. Now you can change methodically what your one personality believes, and I recommend that you do so. But your mind is so powerful that it is keeping your body in the physiological condition that it is in. We are holding ourselves by our beliefs in either health or ill health, because we deeply believe whatever it is that we're manifesting. And getting at those deep beliefs is not something to just do simply, but it is possible to change those kinds of beliefs. And it is possible to awaken positive emotions so that those negative emotions are no longer destroying cellular function, and really come back from severe illness just by working by your emotions, through your emotions and your beliefs. A good friend of mine once said, when asked, well, isn't it true that a lot of these things are just in people's heads? And he said, well, yes, but that's the worst place for it to be.
Oh, that's a good one. Well,
So,
I have a sense that, I mean, I know that you've been an author and very successful, but I have a sense this book is going to put you up here on the New York bestselling list.
well, I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
certainly hope it. Not so much for me, but I think
Information.
it
Yeah,
can help people. I think it can
absolutely.
really give people the keys to self-heal.
Yeah.
That is the magic of it.
Yeah, that's the
You
whole.
can take charge and self-heal.
I mean, that's me too. I'm here about the work, and I know that's what you're here for, and for it to be known is a wonderful thing, because more and more people would have access to it. So I'm going to hold that in my belief about you.
Well, thank you.
Yes. So I want to remind everybody, you can go to Joseph Selbie. You can go to his website. It's in the comment section on social. You can order now the Kindle version of his book, The Physics of Miraculous Healing, or you can wait another week, another few more days, and you can order and share it with your friends. I mean, this is the kind of book that, don't keep it to yourself, because just about every other person, or every 3 people, I don't know the statistics with terminal illness, but I know the C word is definitely an epidemic. So, meaning the cancer word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for the work you do. And I'm so grateful that you have been on our show and taken the time to participate. And yeah, it's just been an honor. And you want to leave us with some last words or another thought or?
You can do it. You can change yourself. It's really, you're much more powerful. All of us are much more powerful than we often realize. And that while you won't see magic happen in one day, in enough time, you can see magic happen by taking control of the real powers that are making you healthy or unhealthy. And it's really up to you, and you could do it.
And start listening to that conversation you have in the shower.
Yes.
I love that one.
Or if you're driving in the car without the radio, that works too. Just don't get in an accident.
Somewhere in stillness. Exactly. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and appreciate you taking the time to hit that share button and share it with your friends and family and your social media. Thank you for supporting On Fire for Life.